but I'm really interested to hear your thoughts around the relationship between classism, respectability politics, and sexual violence. Because I know Luce mentioned, Rosa Parks. I know we've mentioned how, survivors have to show up in a certain way in order to really get their stories heard and really to get their stories taken seriously. When it comes to reporting, we're still looking for folks to fit the mold. But what are your thoughts on that? The relationship between classism, respectability politics, and sexual violence? Millicent, I'll have you start.
Oh, okay. I mean, I think Luz touched on it in a couple different points where she was saying how Gabrielle Union, Oprah, there are people who are the acceptable Negro stereotype. And those are the ones that also, if you think about who might have the best chance at some form of justice in our flawed system, it's the perfect victim. The perfect victim is not going to be seen as a sex worker. That sex worker is going to be judged, although sex workers can be raped and assaulted. The classism that comes into it, the economics that come into it, people, how they present themselves, what did you have on at the time it happened, all of those things that systems look at are the intersections of classism and colorism and everything else. And as you weed out what's not acceptable, that leaves very few people at the end who could have a form of justice, because at the end of it, a jury of your not peers for the defendant are looking and they're judging the person, even though it's supposed to be the defendant who's judged, but is the credibility of the sexual assault victim in court who's going to be judged. So how did the interaction happen? All of it is the person's demeanor and, how you talk, how you portray yourself. If you turned the officer off, if you turn the advocate off, if you turn the prosecutor off or the judge off, all of those points can be a bad outcome to you if you try and access the system. And if you piss any of the system actors off the wrong way, you might find yourself in the system. Mm-hmm. Now you are the problem. You lied. You are contempt because you don't want to testify or you don't want to participate in the system. There are so many things that, Luz gave the example of who gets to go to legislative day. It can't just be any person. It has to be the one who portrays the image of what the sexual assault or domestic violence victim should be. And a lot of times when we're talking about imaging in the United States, the image is not women of color. That is not the acceptable image. That is not the image that is put out there. That is not the one that will get the attention. Black women's tears are not going to get you the legislative money.
Thank you. Hebo, do you have any thoughts on how you've noticed or seen classism impact refugee survivors?
And in United States, it's completely different than in like home countries. Home countries, and class is something that is very much people get away with the crimes if they have class, if they are and mostly and I remember when we there is some people who are respectful people in politics who the child might cause and but they will everything will be dealt with and in a manner that is under the rug, don't go to, we will pay you for this, don't report it, don't. And so it's things are not, people don't get, victims don't get justice in the third world, and because of many reasons. And with money, people, you can pay the good lawyer to go and advocate for the person who caused harm. So, and sometimes putting the victims in troubles. And so there is so many factors that leads into this, and corruption is another thing in our home countries that is like, and the other time I remember somebody showing one of our advocates sharing a video where a girl was publicly like sexually molested, and the community wasn't like, responding, like, and that shows us like, how are we taking this, and when this the police were talking, how they like they didn't value what was happening to the victim, even if it was on recording and they could see it, and they would be like, we're gonna deal with these matters. And so those are like, there's so many barriers that the victims have to break. And in United States, I feel like, people have made a lot of breakthrough, but in the third world, it's not there yet. It's not there. People are not able to wear the clothing that they feel comfortable in wearing, like miniskirts, like, those clothes, they are being publicly sexually molested, and there is no systems that's protecting them. So it's like, those are things like, that are not like, they have definitely we have to make a lot of hard work, but in American, at least, even we have strong women, like, strong people who are speaking against this. But in the third like, countries, these are not there. So
Luce, did you have any other thoughts? I know I do have a question that I know you probably have some thoughts around if you want me to wait, but if you wanted to add to that.
Well, I think I want to just add that it wasn't until 2003 that the halls of Congress, on the floor of the US Capitol, our lives as women of color was debated in terms of safety, which is what gave life to the culturally specific grant program. And I think that's important for us to know and understand, that even within the construct of a mainstream violence against women movement, it wasn't until 2003 that they're arguing whether we need resources in order for people like Ibu, right, and Millicent and Ujima and the API, Asian Pacific Island Institute, and Casa de Esperanza, and all of these other culturally specific organizations to be able to access funding. Like, I just want to couch that right there. What did you want to ask?
Yeah, so I wanted to know, because you mentioned a friend and mentor of yours is Haitian, and my husband's Haitian, so I am really into sort of what's happening and how anti-Blackness is showing up for refugees. How have you, and this is for any of you, but I'll start with Luce. How have you noticed or observed anti-Blackness or xenophobia impact Black survivors? And then what types of microaggressions or even overt acts are survivors experiencing?
Sure. And so I'll start with my own story. I am Puerto Rican on both sides of my parents. My dad is what you would consider a Black Puerto Rican man, and my mom is what is considered a white Puerto Rican. Hence, here I am, right? I am the youngest and the only girl of 4 children, and the only one that looks like this ambiguous, like I think she's Guyanese or she's South Asian or she's, everything, but I'm Puerto Rican. Like, what the hell, right? like for real, right? And so, and not only am I Puerto Rican, I'm like this New Yorkican, Black, like arrogant New Yorkicanness. Like there's like we have a culture all of ourselves, but even within my own family, Blackness was hatred. Like there was not a day that I didn't hear my mom say things, because of course I'm also reminding her of my father who left her when I was a year old. And there was not a day in my household where, whether it was English or Spanish, but mostly in Spanish, that there wasn't a saying, and I often think about like doing a training just on our sayings in Spanish. And I went to Portuguese and used this analysis, this saying around, you don't marry Black women. Las mujeres negras no se casan. And it's an actual adage, in the same way like it takes a village to raise a child, or whatever these American adages are, right? And it is an actual belief. And I went to Brazil and I shared it. And in Brazil, they have the same one, except it goes even further, and it literally based on race. and our color and our phenotype and how the more African, more Black you look, then that is definitely the woman that you rape. Like literally our cultures have bought into this. And so I hope I'm answering your question. But in my own family, and that is why I think it took me 26 years to say what happened to me. I was 26 years old when I share with my family what actually happened to me. And I shared it in pieces because it's 7 years by different people in my family and by different people in our community, like at different times, right? So like, so for me, it wasn't, I didn't want to tell because of the criminal justice. I didn't want to tell because I didn't even think I didn't even understand that something bad happened to me because I was so young, and it was such a part of my conditioning in my own home. And so we have to reckon as Black people, especially those of us who are Black diasporic people from the Caribbean and from Latin America, have to reckon with the reality of anti-Blackness and colorism in our own communities and in our own families. And we have to demystify and speak up and say, no, this shit ain't funny. Like literally you are told, marry white, so you marry right. Right? So you could limpiar la raza, so you could clean your race. Like these are things that when you hear and you grow up in this way, you believe them, right? And so not only was it in my own household, it is believed in my community in this way. You know, I think of like Maria hit Puerto Rico, but Maria also hit the Virgin Islands, and the world didn't come out for the Virgin Islands. And so I found it as my role, right? As my privileged role as someone who's born and raised in the US to say, no, we need to raise money for the Virgin Islands too, because those are Black folks who also got hit, but we never have those conversations. And as a matter of fact, I think CARICOM, Puerto Rico don't even join because they don't want to be associated with the Caribbean. They want to be associated with Latin America, which we think is white and is not. Literally Black folks, not only in the US are being killed, but Colombia, pick a country, Venezuela, right? Haiti, along the border. If the Dominican Republic continues to build walls, just like Trump wanted to, along the border to keep what? To keep Black Haitians out. Like we have to really reckon and have these conversations. And don't get me wrong, yes, we have to do anti-racism and all that, but we have to reckon with ourselves, especially those of us who come from Latin America and the Caribbean, with what does it mean to continue to use respectability politics, which I think is the death of our people, right? My roommate in college was an African-American sister who got pregnant when she was 18 years old, and her entire church, who she had grown up with in the Black church, they shunned her. They shunned her and kicked her to the curb. She could never come back to that church. Like we've got to get rid of these respectability politics that has us, that maintains this sort of privileged space of if you have money, if you're straight, if you're able-bodied, if you, you know, it's really, and it's hard because it touches on the migrant and the immigrant experience of our families coming here, right? And the dream that we come here with, and how we want to be perfect, but then we create a distance with Black Americans because we're not as bad as them. Like we have to have these real conversations. And I know we don't have a lot of time, so I made them salient because I'm hoping that some of you who are Spanish speaking like me, I'm pissing you off so that you add this to your work, because it is very much interconnected to what allows for rape and sexual violence and incest and child sexual abuse to exist. So I hope I answered your question, but I felt like I needed to talk about it within my story and away from just the systems, because our families are also systems. And if you've not read Digging the Roots of Child Sexual Abuse, Love with Accountability by Aisha Shahida Simmons, it is an amazing book of 40 other Black diasporic survivors like myself, talking about where the real reckoning had to take place. And I think Clemma Lewis is telling us, and mad shout out to her as one of my mentors as well, is telling us that we have to reckon with our family dynamics around the things that we have been conditioned to allow. Like, you know, that's the uncle and everybody knows, but we're not talking about that uncle. Right. And we're not, and we're also not talking about this idea of how we define beauty right? And how it's all based on European, like everybody gotta look like Jennifer Lopez. I'm like, no, most Puerto Ricans do not look like Jennifer Lopez, and don't believe that hype, right? Most Puerto Ricans look like Arturo Schomburg, hence he gave us the Schomburg Center, the largest library of Black history. And so we have to connect these issues and not let anti-Blackness or respectabilities divide us into these little cliques where we can't even come into the room and be with each other to have critical conversations around this.
Millicent or Hebo, any thoughts around how it's impacted survivors or how you've seen it come up in legal systems or legal settings?
I think when you're talking about microaggressions that people would have come up in like legal settings, you're talking about, it's going back to who's acceptable. So if you are too emotional, you're too animated, you're moving your hands, doing things like that, that's not the way they like you in court, right? That is not, that's not what a judge wants to see. The prosecutor's going to think you're too emotional. It's very, the way people communicate, the way we even laugh loudly and move our bodies can be very cultural. But the legal system is based on, historically very staid, very, somber. That sticks out like a sore thumb. You can even say some agencies will refuse people. They're too emotional. She's too volatile. She's too emotional, without really looking and trying to work with the person. Or maybe the advocate thinks that they know better. You need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And then when the person says they don't want to do that, then are they going to get refused services, or they're just going to be handed off to someone else? And now they don't have any resources in their area because they didn't do what the advocate or anyone else told them to do. Those kinds of things are definitely the microaggressions that you will see happen, unfortunately, especially in the legal system.
And I think the examples you gave of really at any point by anyone in the legal system, you sort of are at a disadvantage, because if you don't show up the way they want to, or if you show up in the way that's authentic to you and they don't like it, there's an outcome for you potentially. So I think that's really important. Hebo, did you have other thoughts?
Yeah, the other thing also I will add is also like, when a victim is, for example, let's say a Black woman, and then the perpetrator is maybe a white. So how, like, when seeking justice, like, it's not gonna be favorable for the Black. And then the other time, sometimes, even some spaces when we Black women we're talking somewhere, are we considered too loud, too, like, confronting, too, like, aggressive, too, like, because we are trying to break those barriers. Already, like, the system has laid so many barriers for, and not only service providers, victims, and every, like, people who have a Blackness. And the other thing is also, are we trying, and because even some organizations, and even though we, like, all the time we're cultural specific organization, sometimes, like, when we and ourselves, we trying to provide services, but we don't have, we rely some materials from and mainstream, and we like, no, this one doesn't serve any purposes for our Black people, like, we have to change everything. We have to be like, we have to have that open-mindedness, and like create and something that's specific, because every victim is unique, and every victim needs are different than the other victims. For our people, it's completely different how they want it, how they see justice for them, for themselves, how, what are the things that they want. It's not just like, one piece together everything. So services are different, and people, like, sometimes even we will see, like, of people from our community, they don't, like, trying to embrace the other, like, changing their colors, changing their, like, we're not comfortable in our own skin, so that's are some of the things that we see.
Thank you. Can you talk about a little bit more about some of the unique challenges that might exist for younger generations experiencing sexual violence that maybe didn't exist 10 or 20 years ago, or vice versa? I'm thinking and before you answer, I know I like cut you off, but I'm thinking specifically about people's tension around technology and the, you know, what happens there. A lot of folks automatically tend to blame technology as if technology is the root of, you know, revenge porn or the root of a lot of different things that we might see. But whatever comes up for you, sort of thinking about differences with generations. Millicent or Hebo, would you want to start?
I can start. My first thought is thank God that I'm not young now, that I got to live my youth and college years anonymously and not on someone's TikTok or Instagram feed. I think one thing is the law has not caught up to technology. So the fact that people can videotape everything and you get these snippets, the law is behind all that. And, you know, on TV, they act like you can show a video and somebody's convicted and it's all done in an hour because that's a TV show. That's not real life. Real life, the law is behind where technology is. So unfortunately, young people today are living in a situation where some of their victimization is being captured. Maybe they are the victim of something and someone else is videotaping. And because of the way young people do things, it gets put on TikTok quickly. You know, I mean, older people would be Facebook Live, but everybody else is Instagram and TikTok, and things happen really quickly, which the video might not show the whole story. So if the video gets out and it shows you being victimized and it looks like a porn still, but it actually is a sexual assault happening to you, then what comes out and what a survivor would have to live in is everybody going, oh, we saw you Friday night, saw a video of you at the party Friday night. And that's very traumatizing for people because they have a different recollection. It wasn't a party for them. It wasn't fun. And also the legal system then doesn't know, is a snippet real? Is it been edited? So there's going to be less valuation of it. But there's this whole social judgment that survivors have to deal with, because before this technology existed, unless somebody was doing like home porn with cameras and things like that, you wouldn't see these things. And now it's as simple as, you know, picking up your iPhone and you can capture mini movies. And I mean, there is value to video. I'm not saying there's not value, because obviously videotapes have also helped people, especially people of color, when they're being attacked and things like that, and to prove their innocence. So there is value, but it is a very dangerous time. And I think for young people, it also impacts them psychologically, that the dissemination of negative images of you, the dissemination of your victimization, especially if you don't choose to report, if everyone in your high school knows, if everyone in your small town knows, if everybody has seen, that is a huge amount of interest, activity, judgment, shame being put upon you. And we don't really have resources that we provide to people who, even a revenge porn site could be hard to get down, let alone somebody posted a TikTok of a sexual assault of you. And it might just be somebody who captures it and they just put it up there, and they don't care who you are. They don't care who the perpetrator is. They just care that they got a moment, because it seems like a lot of people just capture these images and don't even call, you know, to try and help you. They just want to capture something, in going viral seems to be the big thing, without looking at, these are actually people. This interaction is actually harm happening to someone. And I don't know. I mean, technology, there are pluses. Like, I do like my iPhone, but there are huge minuses when we're talking about sexual assault, and the law will be years behind catching up to a lot of this stuff, because it takes a while for them to enact laws where you could even use videos for everything, and record and things like that. And if you live in a place where recording takes consent of two parties, it's not like somebody who's sexually assaulting you is going to consent to the recording, because that would never happen. So I just think that there are a lot of issues to me around social media and video, unfortunately.
Yeah. Other thoughts, Hebo or Luce?
I will say, yeah, that it has become an issue, like, you know, and sex texting and pornography and those things, like, you know, technology, it has its and pros and cons both. and people have taken it to the notch. Some of them, like, have recorded some things and are using against the victims that like, so you have. And one time I saw this clip from one of the lady from the community where somebody just recorded, and that was her husband, or I don't know, like, somebody that she was, and they were using that against her. And all the time they were like, come to those places, before we publicize this. And then she was getting tired of it, and she was like, go ahead and do it. So when they do it, she was like, they're gonna do it, it's gonna run for a while, but they keep gonna forget it. But that also, like, those are, she was brave enough to come up and say, like, go ahead, do it. But there's a lot of victims who don't have that courage, or say, like, don't publicize it, I'm gonna consent to whatever you want. And that is like, those victims that are already on that, like, manipulated throughout, and most of the time.
Luz?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to, we have to go into our families and into our communities and have real big conversations around incest, around child sexual abuse, in ways that we have not yet begun to do so. I'm gonna uplift to one of my survivor beloveds, Ignacio Rivera, gender fluid, queer, best prevention educator I know, based in Baltimore. You want to check them out. I'll put their link in the chat. It's called Heal to End Project. And Ignacio says to us, we teach our kids how to drive, we teach our kids how to cook, but we don't take the time to teach our kids about respecting their bodies and other people's bodies. So much so that something like technology is used in a way to harm our bodies, right? So like everything that Millicent and Hebo said. And then I also want to stress that schools themselves don't even know what to do when these cases happen. Like, they are completely at a loss. They don't even know where to begin to even end, or what to do, and neither do rape crisis centers. And so it's a conversation where, if those of you who are on this call and can hear me, and like all this techie stuff that is above my head, and want to get down and do, I think there's a lot of work that can be done there. But I also think it starts at home and in our community. We spend a lot of time talking about racism, and rightfully we should, but we don't spend enough time talking about how sexism and misogyny has infiltrated our communities, to think that that's part of our culture in some way.
I do want to go ahead and open it up for some questions or comments from the group. If folks want to maybe raise their hand so we can see one person at a time, but raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. I know the chat's been, live, but if folks wanted to ask the panelists some questions, we can do that now. I also have some additional questions I can just keep asking, but I'm trying to give space to the group. So folks, questions for the group?
First of all, I want to thank all of you beautiful ladies. Y'all are awesome, and I really appreciate you being on here today and sharing your stories and other things. My question for all of you is, when I'm working with a victim whose culture, family, and community tell her that part of her being is to be victimized sexually, how do I reach out and support her when her own family, her own mother, is participating in that? Well, we're all just raped at 14, and that's kind of what happens in our community. So how can I reach out to a victim like that?
We have seen cases like that, and it's not like, and from experience wise, and what we used to do is like, we used to allow that and victim to at least join a peer-to-peer group, which NISA has, and to be like so, because sometimes when those services, and it's so hard sometimes, like, talking to that mother and say, hey, this is not acceptable, this is, but again, the approach you're going to use is like, you have to identify that mother, which, because we always, this is the strategy we use at NISA, is like, we try to find, if we're gonna talk issues about sexual assault, we need to find that community, somebody from that community who's gonna go in and talk. Because when we came, my community perceive a sexual assault in a different way from another African community. So we need to understand the traditional, the traditional, the norms, everything. So the approaches will be like, who is somebody that this mother can, somebody that this mother will be receptive, taking her advices and listening to her. The other thing is like, the service is a priority to the victims, but the victims, even if we provide services to the victims, if the house and the mother is not somebody who see this as an issue, then this, it will not, we have to treat the wound from the bottom to go, so it's good to have a conversation with the mother and send somebody who she can relate to, who can give her, and that's what we always do, this support group where she will need to understand and have her what her fears are, what are the things that preventing her from getting justice for her daughter. How can she support of her daughter? Maybe have that one-on-one conversation and with somebody who looks like her to pass that information to her. And then also another services for the victim. So that's how approaches that we use at our organization. I don't know whether that's helpful, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it was really helpful. And I'm sorry, Yana, I'm gonna jump in here. And I'm just gonna say that in the same way we have to liberate this country from this long love with patriarchy and white supremacy, we have to liberate this movement. And so clearly what that is saying to us, that scenario that the person asked the question about, is saying to us that all the funding that we get from the Violence Against Women Act and philanthropists and foundations, we still are not it's still not seeping into supporting Black and Brown communities across the US and in the US territory, in US occupied territories around what this work looks like. And so rather than see this as a dag, that's so sad, the whole family has no problem. I actually want to say and challenge you to think that if you took the time to talk to that family, that you will probably see that there's other survivors in that family, and that perhaps there's more work that needs to be done. But more important than that, sink some of your funding into that community to do a listening session with that community, so that that community, because I guarantee you, everybody in that community is not thinking the same way that family might be thinking, the same way my family thought as well, right? But there are people in that community that are probably the ones that our people go to for help with immigration status, for help with an advocacy around school, for help and advocacy around the police and all these systems, and are also wanting to tap into this issue of sexual violence, but they don't have the resources and they're not linked up with the people who have the resources. So if we continue to just think that this work can only be done by rape crisis centers, then we silence the very communities that are the ones that are gonna wrap themselves around our young people and our survivors to be able to do this work in the same way Hebu and her and their comrades across this country. So use it as a way to have a conversation with your organization that says, when's the last time that we really focused in this community, and how could we bring some leaders from that community into our offices and begin to talk about how do we unpack this reality, not from a deficit place, but from a place that you can uplift and do some really critical work around that. And knowing that maybe your agency can only go but so far, but you can release some of those fundings. And if they don't have a 501c3, you could be a pass-through for them and you can provide some funding for it.
Thank you. And thank you for your question, Kara. I see a hand from, I think it's Clemma.
Yeah, I want to say good afternoon and a special hello to Luz and Greta. I'm Clemma Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Coalition in St. Croix, and been doing this work in the Virgin Islands for 40 years. And it's with victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. I applaud the panelists, you were excellent, but I'm at the stage with Luz now. We really got to work on our community. I'm getting ready to do a big workshop next month on sibling incest in our community because it's not getting any better. We still trying to shut it up. We got 2 senators we calling out now for sexually harassing their staff. I mean, for some of you all, this might seem like something that happened in the past, but we still living it. My community is 90% people of color. So I don't have the racism issues you have, but I have the internalized racism and prejudice because we don't get what we do to each other. We don't get the colorisms. We don't get the name calling. We don't get calling down each island because that's what we do, calling people Santo and Garrett, instead of appreciating and support each other. I hope those of y'all in this, doing this work, realize when you're dealing with people from the Caribbean, it is different because we come from a different perspective. But I just want to piggyback with Luce that is so important for us to spend more time. And I give our money, Luce, and I use my money in this community, in this predominantly Black community and Boca. And it's all about our people and trying to set them free and running groups. And we got a lot of violence going on. So now I have to reach out to homicide survivors. It get deeper and deeper by the minute, but we have to be willing to do the work. You can't be afraid. You have to be willing to be ostracized by your community, call names, say you're a troublemaker. I think every name in the book, I've heard it. But what's important is that we got to make a difference, and we can use the language, but it's time we go in our communities and make a difference, because I'm tired of seeing generations of women still being hurt. 30 and 40 years old telling me about what happened to them when they were 8 because nobody helped them. So I want to appeal to the group. We got to go inside our own communities and find a way to make a difference. And guess what? They're open. Well, if you heard this myth about we don't listen and we don't want help, that's not true. I have never reached a community here wasn't open to hear what I had to say, wanted to support, and was looking for help. We just got to have that open heart, that spirit, and be willing to do what we need to do to get us through it. So please reach out. Let's look at let's have another focus on trying to help our community and clean out all this incest, domestic violence, sexual abuse, trafficking, the whole 9 yards. It's all in our backyard. So I say thank you, women, and the panelist was excellent. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Clemma. That was a whole word. Please make sure to drop your contact information in the chat, and I'll be definitely reaching out to you for a workshop soon. So I'm excited. Stephanie, did you have a question or comment?
Well, it's more like a comment, and I just want to appreciate you guys having this. I am very passionate about these particular issues that we are advocating right now during this month of Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I am here in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a dancer actively in the hip hop culture. And one of the things that I like to combat, especially in the hip hop culture, is these particular issues, which is issues, especially with us dancers in our community and stuff. So I'm like, me and other dancers in different cities and states are really combating on these particular issues and been following each other and stuff like that. And so to join in and listening to what you guys are speaking on, it resonates so much. And what the things we deal with, you know, especially the women, and I know the men also are affected too, but they're so quiet because, you know, in the entertainment industry, it can be a little tricky. And then, you know, people can get affected if they want to come forward to saying stuff and speaking out. So it kind of affects their career and stuff. But I'm right now, I'm a part of an organization called National Organization for Women, and I am a committee member of the Violence Against Women committee, and just wanted to just give you guys, you know, salutes. I love y'all's platform, love what you guys do, and we're actually having an event at the end of this month, next weekend. It's called Jam for Sam, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and I'm hoping to invite dancers out so we can bring awareness within our culture and within our community. There are other dancers in other cities and states that are having them. I had a B-girl out in New Mexico who had an event that focused not only on sexual assault, but other issues that was bringing awareness. And then there's dancers in Chicago, and they're focusing on healing, mostly. Healing is the main focus on a lot of these events. So at this event, we just want to focus on dance as a healing aspect and getting resources out to the dancers and anybody within the community. So
Oh my God, I love everything that she just said, and I'm gonna follow them and see. I grew up in the hip hop era in Harlem, and I remember the days of Gestapos. I don't know what y'all remember, but the days of Gestapos, and given what happened to me for 7 years between the ages of 7 and 15, I was in and out of like petty crime and drug addiction, and so I was heavy into the streets, and so this is the time of the African Bambaataa and Zulu Nation and East, you know, on the East Coast, right? And graffiti and all of that. And I think it was like maybe 10 years ago, a lot of the male dancers did come out and actually came to the Albany Capitol to talk about child sexual abuse within the music hip hop industry, and called out African Bambaataa. But I think there's a lot more work. So kudos to you for doing it. If you're in Chicago, hopefully you've connected to A Long Walk Home, Salamisha Tillett. Look them up. They do amazing work with young people. And Atlanta Sister Song, my comrades at Sister Song do it's a Black organization that does reproductive health, and they also connect and do a lot of work with DC Rape Crisis around sexual assault. So just want to shout them out for you to connect to.
Thank you. If it's possible, could I get any of their contacts or anything like that? Could you send that to me?
I'll try to put it in the link because I think everybody should know, because these are all, I don't think they call themselves culturally specific because they sort of run they're sort of outside of the mainstream violence against women world, but they do amazing, amazing work. And so I'll just throw them in the chat.
Okay,
and
thank
Stephanie,
you.
feel free to add your details to the chat as well, so people can learn more about what you're doing, because that's really amazing work. Danielle.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for the panel. This has been like really, really beautiful, and so happy that this space was created for Black women survivors, just Black survivors in general. And so I am a community educator with Connect NYC. We work on intimate partner violence in New York, and in particular, I work with the faith communities. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on, I guess, twofold. One, what are some strategies for communal healing spaces for survivors? And then a second piece to that, if you don't mind just speaking on the role of the faith communities in that as well.
I'm so sorry, but I feel like I want to take this on because I don't want to leave the space without giving a shout out to the work that we do on July 25th, because it is a communal space. July 25th is known as the International Day of la Mujer Negra internationally. It's mostly celebrated in the Caribbean and throughout Latin America. It was founded by 4 Dominican sisters in the Dominican Republic who were fed up with racism and sexism. And so we've used it since 2016 as a way to approach communal healing. I'm gonna also share the link, or I'll send it to Yana, around the research that I co-authored based on 50 listening sessions with 50 adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, all who are part of the Black diaspora. Ibu actually took part in it, and some of her staff, when I drove out to Iowa from the East Coast, which was, that's a call in and of itself. But anyway, one of the things that came out from these listening sessions was the need for communal healing, like to heal in community. So yes, for many of us, and for me myself, I've done it for 20 years, done the one-on-one Western way of healing, but also what is communal healing, and then really rooting it down into African traditions and what that looks like. And for many of you who are like, well, what is she talking about? I'm talking about Santeria, Ifa, Yoruba, all of the ways, candomblé, all of the ways that we as African people, right, have utilized the earth and natural resources in order to maintain our lives, even through the worst of times. And so we use July 25th, not only as a day to celebrate ourselves as Black Latinas and Black Caribbean women, but also to honor those of us who are survivors, to speak our truth, to build solidarity with each other. And we do it in DC, in collaboration with the DC Rape Crisis Center, with the Afro-Latino Caucus of DC, and sometimes, depending on the mayor's office, maybe them, but it's really a space for us as communities, Black queer folks, Black people with disabilities. Before Ntozake Shange, who's the author of For Color Girls Only, passed away, she would make this like her annual event and come to it. And she would say to me all the time, because she too was a survivor of child sexual abuse and incest, but never really sought, she used her art and her writing as a way to tell our stories. And she was like, Luce, and we talk in Portuguese, Spanish, English, we talk 4 different languages, including ASL, because we understand how colonization works to separate us. And so I just want to mass shout out for that. It's what Black Women's Blueprint did in 2016 when they did the Truth and Reconciliation, and they had us, I think it was in the old Harlem church, sharing our truth. Right. And so we're often taught, like, when you have a conference, you have one room and that's the safety room. This entire space becomes the safety room, because we know that as Black people, we have been inundated since the founding of this country on trauma. And so all of us have to treat each other with some mad, deep love and respect and grace, even when we're saying shit that don't make no goddamn sense. Right. And so so we don't just have one room, we have the entire room, we have altars in every room, we have healers that is their only job, is to be around. And I'm not talking about 3 people or 2 people, I'm talking about 10 people that are walking and around this space, so that if people are crying, we're not trying to stop them from crying, we're trying to witness them and stand with them in solidarity. Because for many of us, we're not allowed, as Black women, we are not ever allowed to just be and break down. We have to be perfect. I'm telling you, respectabilities is going to kill us. And so this space is not even part of, you have to like couch your pain until you could get to it. No, you don't have to couch shit. We have to release, and we have to support each other, right? In a non-judgment way around what that ends up looking at, whether it's full on rage or tears or laughter, whatever it looks like for our people, we have to think about setting those up outside of this traditional way that we've been taught by this movement that only doesn't even work for them as white people. And so hopefully that has helped you. A great group, if you're in New York, and I'm assuming that you probably work with Quentin Walcott, because I believe he works at Prevent Connect New York. And I know that he's, yeah, okay, so ask Quentin to get you connected to Harriet's Apothecary, because Uta is an African sister, is amazing. And this is literally what they live for, and they're all healers. They're social work, academic healers, and they're also spiritual healers.
Great, thank you.
Other questions or comments? So I have a question. We've been talking through it already, but what are some other strategies or thoughts around, whether it's a mainstream or a culturally specific program, but what are your thoughts around getting folks active and getting folks invested in ensuring that their services are culturally relevant, are culturally humble?
I think doing research and with the community that you're working with, and that is one thing that, you know, when we were we're establishing this, the first thing we did was an assessment where we wanted to know and go to the leaders, like community leaders, and see. And we've seen, like, you know, how far these people, like, you know, some will talk about it and some will not talk about it. And so it's just good to know the background of the community that you're dealing with, their norms, their tradition. For us, like, you know, one thing that we always, and we have been talking a lot about, is like female genital cutting, which is something that is traditionally practiced and is something that has, like, you know, embedded in the community. It's been passed on from generation to generation. But that's a part of also sexual assault that people, like, you know, are not like that much aware of. And so it's good, like, you know, and breaking those barriers and providing those services will not be and well received if you don't know the cultural values of these and practices. So it's like, you know, it's good and to know the community that you're dealing with, what are their norms, what are their and how to approach, formulate plans of how you're gonna approach them. And cultural specific organization, that's why we say, like, our services are unique. And because we try to dig and think outside the box, and, like, try to make services available. For example, if we, like, wherever, when we were doing the female genital career education, we would say, like, a female of these victims will take much longer time in, like, even going through the reporting, assessment, like saying nurses. Those are things that you need to understand and be prepared for. And a lot of times, like, things, a lot of service providers are not prepared for receiving, even at the hospital, receiving this kind of population. And they had because this has been done to them when at a young age. It's a sexual assault. It's but is that something that's talked about a lot? No. So it's good to dig around, know the historical and the background and the community you're dealing with, and the services can be tailored to the needs of the victim. And that.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
I think both of my co-presenters kind of touched on it, that in order to really be an informed ally, you actually do have to see who your community is before the first person comes in the door. Because now you're just reacting to the person there, but you don't have any relationship with the community. You don't know anything about their culture. So it's hard to provide appropriate services when you haven't looked to see who you're supposed to be serving. You have to see who's in the community, and then have some diversity on your staff too. It's not just being an ally, it's actually having people who provide services that look like the community. And I think Lou's brought up the point about it might be working with organizations who are actually supporting and uplifting Black women. It might not be your organization that actually is the appropriate one. I think Hibu also said the same thing with religious organizations, but that trickles down through all of the services. In order to know what type of services are going to be culturally appropriate, you do have to look and see what community you're working in, and what people are accessing your services. And it might be that all you're going to be doing is providing a warm handoff to someone else to actually provide the services, somebody who is more appropriate than your organization. But that also means that money needs to be provided sometimes too, because all work can't be for free. But I do think it's important to look and see who's actually working with the communities and having those relationships, creating those relationships with other service providers, with the people who really know what is going on, because you're going to need assistance.
Look, I think it's 2022. And if you are still trying to figure out cultural competency or cultural relevance or whatever the heck, then you are archaic and you are part of the racism and white supremacy problem. Like, no, I mean, if you really are in the business of helping survivors, then you must know that you can't possibly help all survivors. And so make space in your local communities for what you think are not leaders, and we know in the hood are the real leaders of that community, right? Use your allyship. If and I don't know, I'm looking at pictures and I don't see too many, but I think so. I want to speak to us as Black women, but if you are in here and you're a white ally, use your allyship and your privilege of receiving violence against women dollars or OVS dollars or FIPSA dollars to release some of those fundings and be a pass-through the same way your state coalition is a pass-through to you. You could do that. You could easily do that. And do not co-opt the way that they're choosing to organize. Listen to what Hibu's saying. Hibu is right. The community may not use your same language. They may not even use your same approach, but they should not, because if they do, then we will continue to hear stories of girls who are like me, who were sexually abused, and my family don't know what to do and don't even want to talk about it till this day, you all. Like, so I'm not sharing something with you that I myself has not experienced till this day. Till this day, I am still reckoning with how do we talk about the bystanders in my family, my brothers, my mothers, my cousins, my aunts, who just stood there and were okay with me being silent until I was 26 years old. Like, come on, there's some shit, we got to figure that out. And then to us as a people, look, We know that before Christianity landed and made itself a colonizer of our people, that many of us were Muslim, many of us were practicing African traditions, and look to those ways of uplifting some healing around what that looks like. And if you don't know, then look at the work of Octavia Butler, who's like talking about Afrofuturism and using like the earth and the stars and whales to literally think about how we as a people who are sun people, who are people of this earth, used it to care for ourselves. Unleash and decolonize your relationship with these white notions of what it means to heal and what it looks like in a serious way, you all. Look to Africa for what are the Black leaders in our motherland doing in an effort to push and stand up against misogyny and patriarchy in our own communities. And I think that is how we will find ways. And that's how also we will build solidarity. Look to see what Clem is doing in the Virgin Islands and has been doing for the last 40 years. Like that is where we will get these answers. And that is how we'll know that we are doing culturally specific work. Because our community will tell us, I don't know what you're doing, Luz. You're nuts. That shit ain't coming. Like they'll tell us, you know, like please, like I don't think us asking, people are going to be on death silence. People are dying to be asked in the same way that when I was 12, I wanted my teachers to ask me, why was I so angry? Why was I cut in class? What was that about? But nobody asked me because Black girls and Black femmes and Black children are seen as disposable. And we must see our lives with the obligation that we need to make a difference.
Thank you. I just want to give space for maybe one or two more questions or comments before we wrap up. Okay, so if anyone does have any final comments, questions, feedback, or want to reach out, please, presenters, please share your contact information in the chat. Our Ujima team will also share our TTA contact information for folks who want to reach out and connect. We have a lot more workshops, conferences, Ujima talks, coffee and convos, cookouts coming up. For Black advocates in this space who are interested, we have recently started a space that's been intentionally designed for Black advocates in the field, and it's called The Cookout. You're all invited. Please look out for more information. We're hosting sort of monthly modality based, so yoga, healing circles, meditation, or conversation based spaces. So look out for those. And we also have our regular coffee and convo series that we do. That's an open space to everyone, just informal, relaxed. Bring your tea, bring your coffee or a cocktail, whatever you want, and just have conversation for that afternoon. And then of course, our regular webinars as well that we host throughout the year. So please check out our website. Our information will be coming out more and more. Our wonderful presenters, thank you all so, so much. Again, contact information, please share it in the chat. And I think let's go ahead and end off on final thoughts for the group. Last words for survivors or advocates doing this work. Let's start with you, Millicent. Last thoughts.
The thing that you said are final thoughts for advocates. And I guess my final thought for advocates would be take care of yourself. This is not easy work. This is really hard work and it's not going to end anytime soon. So you need to practice self-care. You need to realize that assisting people and trying to change systems it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you want to make sure that you maintain your own personal health as you do this work, because you're all doing really, really good work, but it's hard work. This is hard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Millicent. Hibo?
I will also echo what Millie said, and yeah, this work and will never end, and it's good to take care of yourself, for you to be competent, like to be mindful, like to be well enough to take care of somebody else. We carry people's burden, we carry people's traumas, and also we are also human beings, that we also have our own lives. So and it's also bring courage to be in this and your shoes, and but our survivors need us, and we always put their lives before ours. So be ground yourself, take care of yourself. Self-care is important. Take your mental health days if your organization offers, and yeah, be at least mindful of yourself and your family and your survivors too.
Thank you. And I saw a comment come through. We will be sharing the recording. Yes, we will publish it when it's cleaned up a little bit tech-wise, because then we had that pause in the beginning. So yes, we'll be sharing it, as well as other information will be coming out on our website and social media. And then Luce, I'm going to go ahead and give you the final word. But again, this has been an amazing conversation, and we really appreciate everyone and what you all have brought to this space. Go ahead and take it away, Luce.
Wow. You know, normally I start events and we pour libation, because we know as Black people that when we say the names of those who have gone, they never die. They live through us and through our children. And so I offer you all who are listening to me love and grace and deep, deep compassion for self always first. And remembering your ancestors, whether it's your auntie or your mom or a child you may have lost, or Ntozake Shange's and Harriet Tubman's, right? And Nina Simone, and all of these amazing people who have given us joy and art and music and poetry and have really raised this country. May their work and their words and their art also lift you up, so that we can keep lifting each other up. So peace and love, people.
And on that note, thank you all again. Thank you, panelists, participants, for being in this space together and for really being open and honest and sharing and loving towards each other. That's always important in this work. We have 7 minutes of intentional self-care that I'm going to send you off to do on your own. Please do it. Make sure you're breathing, get your water, get your lunch, whatever you need. Take that 7 minutes to do nothing if that's what you need. But again, thank you all. Looking forward to being in space with you in the future and in coming events. But take care of yourselves, be well, and be safe.